Good morning and welcome to the Assembly Committee on Ways and Means. Committee Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Assemblywoman Anderson. Present. Assemblywoman Backus.
Present.
Assemblywoman Brown May.
Here.
Assemblywoman Dickman. Assemblywoman Gorlow.
Here.
Assemblyman Hafen.
Here.
Assemblywoman Hadigi.
Here.
Assemblywoman Kasama.
Here.
Assemblyman Miller.
Here.
Assemblyman O'Neill.
Here.
Assemblywoman Peters.
Here.
Assemblyman Watts.
Here.
Assemblyman Yeager. Chair Monroe Moreno.
And I am here. Would you please mark Assemblywoman Dickman and Assemblyman Yeager as absent excused? Just a few housekeeping things before we start the meeting. If you have any electronic devices, we ask that you mute them now. For those of you attending here in Carson City, I see someone in Las Vegas. And if there's anyone joining us online, welcome. We will have public comment at the end of today's meeting. Out of courtesy and respect to others, we ask that you hold your comments for public comment to just 2 minutes. We have a very short agenda today. We will have 2 bill hearings, and we will start with Assembly Bill 152. It makes an appropriation to restore the balance in the reserves for the statutory contingency account. So, with that, we welcome you to the dais, or to the table.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the Assembly Committee on Ways and Means. I am Amy Stevenson, Director for the Governor's Finance Office, and I thank you for this opportunity to present AB 152. This is probably the shortest testimony you will have. This bill replenishes the statutory contingency account in the amount of $42,139,109. Approximately $32 million of this is for court settlements, and $9 million is to reach the targeted balance of $15 million for this account. This concludes my presentation, and I await any questions you may have of me.
This will probably be the shortest testimony we'll get. Members, any questions? Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ms. Stevenson, for your detailed explanation of the bill. I was just curious because I checked out the statute and realized it was going to play some claims. Was the $32 million just like an outstanding balance on claims that were previously settled, previously agreed to be paid through IFC?
Amy Stevenson, for the record, through you, Madam Chair, to Assemblywoman Backus. Yes, that is exactly what has happened.
All right, seeing no other questions, thank you for the presentation. We will open it up for testimony in support of AB 152. If there's anyone here in Carson City that'd like to testify in support of 152, I invite you up to the table. Seeing none, is there anyone in Las Vegas that came to testify in support of 152? Seeing none, is there anyone on the phone lines? BPS, do we have anyone on the phone line that would like to submit testimony in support of 152?
Testify in support of AB 152. Please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, the public line is open and working, but there are no callers wishing to provide support at this time.
Thank you so much. Then we will move to opposition. Is there anyone here in Carson City that would like to testify in opposition of AB 152? Seeing none, is there anyone in Las Vegas that would like to provide testimony in opposition of AB 152? Seeing none, do we have anyone on the phone line that would like to provide testimony in opposition of AB 152?
Testify in opposition to AB 152. Please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you so much, and we'll move to the neutral. Is there anyone that would like to supply testimony in the neutral on AB 152 here in Carson City, in Las Vegas, or on the phone lines? Seeing no one here in Carson City, no one moving to the table in Las Vegas, do we have anyone joining us by phone that would like to provide testimony in the neutral on AB 152?
Give neutral testimony on AB 152. Please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in neutral at this time.
Thank you so much. So with that, members, we will close the hearing on Assembly Bill 152. And we will open the hearing on our next bill, which will be Senate Bill 124. And 124 revises the provisions relating to the tax upon the net proceeds of minerals and royalties of mining operations. And gentlemen, thank you. Welcome to the committee. And as soon as you're ready to get started, we're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Assembly Committee on Ways and Means. For the record, I am Michael Nakamoto, Chief Principal Deputy Fiscal Analyst with the Fiscal Analysis Division of the Legislative Council Bureau. Before we start, our usual disclaimer: we are nonpartisan Legislative Council Bureau staff. We are not here to support or oppose any legislation. We are here to provide information, and our role today is to provide testimony on Senate Bill 124. I will be going through certain sections dealing with the tax aspects of this bill, and then some of the more technical changes will be turned over to Mr. Fernley and Mr. Killian to my right. So just as a brief overview, this bill relates to the tax, the net proceeds of minerals tax, which is, as the name indicates, a tax on the net proceeds that are earned by mining operations in the state of Nevada. The tax is imposed at a rate of between 2 and 5%, depending on the ratio of net to gross proceeds. There are statutory formulas to determine what the rate should be. There are some exceptions to this. Geothermal operations are taxed exclusively at the property tax rate of the district in which that operation is located. If the operation's net proceeds are in excess of $4 million, the rate is automatically 5%. Any royalties, which is the portion of the proceeds from the extraction of a mineral which is paid for the privilege of extracting the mineral, and the royalties are taxed at 5% as well. And then, absent all of that, the minimum rate that can be imposed upon the operation is the property tax rate of the district in which it's located. So if that rate happens to be higher than whatever is set in statute, then that is the rate that applies. Local governments, cities, counties, and school districts get their proportionate share of the tax based on their property tax rate. The state gets the 17-cent portion that is deposited in the Consolidated Bond Interest and Redemption Fund, and the balance, anything above those rates, goes to the State General Fund, at least in FY23. Beginning in FY24, those proceeds are deposited in the State Education Fund pursuant to Assembly Bill 495 of last session. So, as I mentioned, I'm going to be going through the tax portions of SB 124 today, and I'll start with sections 1 and 2 because that deals with one issue, and then sections 3 and 4 deal with a separate issue. So, sections 1 and 2 deal with the distribution of the 75-cent portion of the net proceeds that goes to the school district. So under the Nevada plan, the money from this 75-cent portion was deposited in or sent to each school district and used as local funds available under the Nevada plan. Senate Bill 543 of the 2019 session changed the funding formula to the pupil-centered funding plan. And what it did not do was change the distribution of how that money was sent from the state to the school districts. So basically what happened is, or what happens now under current law, is that the portions of the net proceeds of minerals tax that are sent to the local governments, counties, cities, the school district, the state sends those revenues to the county, and the county treasurer is then required under current law to apportion those revenues to each respective local government, and they get to keep a commission for that. It's a total of 5%, of which 3% goes to the county general fund, 2% goes to a fund that is used by the county assessor for the acquisition and improvement of technology within that office. And so the money that went to the school districts goes, or went through this same practice as money that went to the county, to any cities, and so on. Even though the Pupil Center funding plan changed it such that all of the school district revenues, instead of going to the school districts, now went to the state education fund, that distribution for the net proceeds of minerals stayed the same. So under current law in NRS 362-170 subsection 2 paragraph C, the money that is sent to the county for the state education fund is then sent by the county back to the state education fund, and they get to keep the 5% for that. So sections 1 and 2 fix that, such that the money, instead of going to the counties and then get sent from the county back to the state education fund, instead is sent by the state directly into the state education fund, thereby bypassing that distribution. Sections 3 and 4 deal with a separate issue that have to do with when the net proceeds of minerals tax is paid. So going back prior to the pandemic, mining companies would pay on or before May 10th their net proceeds of minerals tax that is due for their actual mining activity in the previous calendar year. So we'll use FY 2020 is the example because this is the last fiscal year for which this happened. On or before May 10th of 2020, the mining operators would remit their payment for the net proceeds of minerals tax to the Department of Taxation based on their actual calendar year 2019 mining activity. Then, of course, we had a pandemic, and there was a desire to gain additional revenue. So the legislature, in Senate Bill 3 of the 31st special session in July of 2020, provided for a prepayment of net proceeds of minerals taxes for the state general fund portion, similar to something that the legislature did during the Great Recession. And basically what that said is that beginning for FY21, not only would the mining companies be required to make their actual payment for calendar year 2020 on or before May 10th, 2021, they were additionally required to make an estimated payment for their calendar year 2021 activity on or before March 1st, 2021, essentially booking 2 years' worth of revenue for this revenue source in the State General Fund in FY21. And so then to deal with this going forward, the mining companies would continue to make this estimated payment in FY22 and FY23, along with a true-up of the previous years. Once they know what their actual activity is, they've made these estimated payments, they're allowed to make true-ups throughout the year. But the way that SB 3 was originally drafted is that the entire process would flip back. And so in FY 2024, it was the way that the law is drafted, and under current law, the mining companies no longer have to make that estimated payment. The only thing that they would have to do is make that true-up payment in FY 24 to get their actuals for calendar year 23 to match up to what their estimated payments were that they made the previous fiscal year. So when SB 3 was enacted back in the 2020 special session, your Fiscal Analysis Division staff noted that there would be, in essence, no revenue that would be generated for this revenue source to the state general fund in FY24 because you had to essentially catch up. That accelerated payment you took, you essentially are giving it back. The problem with this, though, I don't know if it's a problem, but the consequence that has come as a result of this, though, is that in the 2021 session, the legislature passed Assembly Bill 495, which moved these proceeds beginning in FY24 from the State General Fund to the State Education Fund. So if you were to go and look at the economic forum sheets for FY24, we have a forecast of 0 for the net proceeds of minerals tax, but that's because of the law change to put the proceeds in the State Education Fund. But what we can also tell you is because of the ending of the prepayment, the forecast for the net proceeds of, or this portion of the net proceeds of minerals tax in the State Education Fund is also 0 in FY24. So sections 3 and 4 of this bill essentially move that date forward of the end of the prepayment from FY24 to FY23. So those changes go back to that language in SB 3 of the 31st special session and move the expiration date of those provisions forward by 1 year. What this essentially would do is take that money that is supposed to go into the state general fund this year and which would be the estimated payment that the mines are supposed to be making on or before March 1st of this year, so in just under 2 weeks from now. They would no longer be required to make that payment, and instead they would be making their payment in FY24 based on their actual 2023 mining activity, and that those proceeds would be dedicated to the State Education Fund. So that is the portion of the bill that I am testifying about. Madam Chair, either we can take questions on that part or we can move on to Mr. Fernley and Mr. Killian, who will be discussing the rest of the bill. Thank you.
Members, I'm going to ask if you have any questions on this part, you write your questions down and we'll take them at the end and we'll continue on.
Thank you. My name is Brian Fernley. I'm the Legislative Counsel with the Legal Division of the Legislative Counsel Bureau. As Mr. Nakamoto stated, we do not advocate or oppose any particular piece of legislation or any policy, but we are here to describe the consequences and the effects of an amendment that was made to SB 124. And that amendment to SB 124 was essentially a technical amendment to clarify some aspects of how the MPM is handled in the State Education Fund and through the People-Centered Funding Plan. So I will turn it over to Asher Killian to describe the substance of that amendment, and those are sections 1.5, 2.3, 2.5, and 5.5.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Asher Killian, Chief Deputy Legislative Counsel, Legal Division of the Legislative Counsel Bureau. As Brian mentioned, and to make the disclaimer one more time, as your legislative staff, we neither support nor oppose any particular piece of legislation or policy. We're merely here to explain the effect of this legislation. As Brian mentioned, the provisions we're going to cover are technical amendments that were made to ensure that to the extent that there have been any questions about the People-Centered Funding Plan and how it operates in relation to the net proceeds of minerals tax, that those provisions are carried out in a constitutional manner consistent with the original intent of the legislature. Taking a step back to describe the constitutional framework, Article 4, Section 21 of the Nevada Constitution is Nevada's equivalent of an equal protection clause. And then Article 11, Section 2 of the Nevada Constitution requires the legislature to create a uniform system of common schools. These provisions taken together generally require the legislature to equitably fund schools in Nevada across the state regardless of zip code. However, one provision of the Constitution that Mr. Nakamoto touched on, Article 10, Section 5, requires net proceeds of minerals money to go back to the counties where the minerals were mined, and that happens in a manner that isn't necessarily equitable because not all counties in Nevada have an equal amount of minerals in the ground. So the Nevada plan and then the people-centered funding plan that followed it harmonized these constitutional provisions to provide funding to education, K-12 education in Nevada in a manner that was as equitable as possible, given that one inequitable distribution of money that's required by the Nevada Constitution. That's why there are particular provisions in the people-centered funding plan that deal with the distribution of net proceeds of minerals money slightly differently than other money that flows through the pupil-centered funding plan. I want to note two statutory provisions before we get into the meat of this bill. The first is NRS 387-1213. This is the provision in the people-centered funding plan that creates the education stabilization account. This is effectively a rainy day fund just for education. NRS 387-1213 requires any money in excess of 16.6% of the total budgeted ending fund balance in each county school district's fund to be turned over to the education stabilization account. It's a tongue twister. I'm going to say it a few more times. In the state education fund each year. This effectively allows school districts to keep 2 months of reserve, and anything in excess of 2 months of reserve gets turned over to the education stabilization account to serve as a rainy day fund for education in the state. The other provision I want to mention is NRS 387-1214. This is the provision that states how money flows out of the state education fund to the county school districts. In particular, subsection 6 deals with net proceeds of minerals money. Subsection 6, paragraph A provides that to the extent that a county school district is entitled to net proceeds of minerals money, the first money distributed from the state education fund to that county school district is that net proceeds of minerals money that the school district is entitled to. Paragraph B provides that to the extent that a county school district would be entitled to more net proceeds of minerals money than it would otherwise be entitled to through the people-centered funding plan, so excess net proceeds of minerals money, that money also flows back to the county school district in the form of a continuing appropriation to mitigate the cyclical nature of the mining industry. So in other words, under the Nevada plan, counties were kept whole for the net proceeds of minerals money because it flowed directly to the county. Under the pupil-centered funding plan, that money flows into the state education fund first, but counties are still kept whole in that all money that they would have received, they either receive through PCFP dollars or through this continuing appropriation. So no money is lost by the school districts. That money is just accounted for in the state education fund first. So moving on to the four technical changes. The first one is in section 2.3 of the bill, subsection 5, paragraph C. And this concerns that excess net proceeds of mineral money above and beyond what the district would otherwise be entitled to pursuant to the pupil-centered funding plan. The change in this paragraph is to make it explicit, as was the intent with the original pupil-centered funding plan legislation, that this excess net proceeds of mineral money is exempt from being transferred over to the education stabilization account. So to the extent that one of these school districts that receives excess NPM money still has money beyond that 16.6% of their total budgeted ending fund balance in any fiscal year, they get to keep that excess net proceeds of minerals money. It's not subject to reversion to the ESA. The second technical change is in section 2.3, subsection 5, paragraph B. Generally, the portion of net proceeds of minerals money that is for debt service or capital obligations does not flow through the pupil-centered funding plan. The pupil-centered funding plan is for operational funds for schools, not for capital funds for schools. The intent of this paragraph is to make it explicitly clear that to the extent that there is any of that capital funding or debt service funding that is in a county school district's general fund, as opposed to a separate capital or debt service fund, that money is also exempt from being turned over to the ESA. So that money would not be reverted to the ESA even if it's in excess of 16.6% of their total budgeted ending fund balance. The third technical change is in section 2.3, subsection 5, paragraph A, and also section 5.5 of the bill. And this concerns school districts that already were holding a reserve of more than 16.6% when the pupil-centered funding plan became effective. Under section 77 of SB 543 from the 2019 session, there was a slightly complicated mechanism where instead of having a baseline of 16.6%, any district that had a higher reserve as of June 30th, 2020, instead had that reserve level set as their cap. They were able to keep a reserve up to that cap without money being turned over to the ESA. Any money by which they then exceeded that cap in future years would be turned over. If they didn't keep a reserve up to that cap, but that was still above 16.6%, then that became their new cap amount in the next fiscal year. And once they finally got down to a reserve of 16.6% in some future fiscal year, that cap kicked in for them just like all the other school districts. It's kind of a ratcheting down mechanism for districts that were already keeping a reserve in excess of what the pupil-centered funding plan contemplated. As you can tell, that's a complicated mechanism. The main reason for it was that the pupil-centered funding plan wasn't becoming effective immediately, so we didn't know on what date it would kick in, and we didn't know what dollars would be affected. Section 2.3, subsection 5, paragraph A, and section 5.5 of this bill repeal that complicated framework and replace it with a more simple approach of any dollar that you had as a county school district on or before June 30th, 2020, so any of your Nevada plan money is exempt from being turned over to the ESA. We're only applying that 16.6% reserve cap to your pupil-centered funding plan money going forward. So it's basically replacing that very complex structure with a much simpler approach of the ESA doesn't take your Nevada plan dollars that you may still have, it only applies to your pupil-centered funding plan dollars going forward. The final change in section 2.5 of the bill, this is the provision that I mentioned earlier that your net proceeds of minerals dollars are considered to be the first dollars from the state education fund into your county school district fund. The intent of this provision was always also that they would also be the first dollars out of your county school district fund when you spend each fiscal year. This provision makes that explicit, that these dollars are also the first dollars out of your county school district fund. This is an accounting measure. I believe the state treasurer may have previously said that money is not only fun, it's also fungible. And this is meant to account for that. Once NPM dollars go into your county school district fund and they get mixed in with dollars from all the other sources, and you then start spending that money, those dollars lose their character as net proceeds of mineral money. They can't be tracked anymore in that fashion. And this section is carrying out that intent that for accounting purposes, those net proceeds of minerals dollars lose their character and they're the first dollars out of the county school district fund each year. The purpose of this provision is net proceeds of minerals dollars are constitutionally protected. This is ensuring that the pupil-centered funding plan is carried out in a way that that complies with that constitutional provision and protects those net proceeds of minerals dollars to the greatest extent possible. So those are the four technical changes that were in the bill. That were not strictly fiscal, but were related to the net proceeds of minerals tax. And I think at this point, we're happy to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Members, questions? Assemblyman Hafen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just for clarification, you mentioned that the 16.6 would be the cap going forward. Could you just clarify, does that mean going forward from when this act goes into effect, or are we talking about going forward from June 30th, 2020?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Asher Killian, Chief Deputy Legislative Counsel, Legal Division, through you to the Assemblyman. So the framework that was set up in SB 543 of 2019 was that the benchmark date for the changeover from Nevada plan to PCFP was June 30th of 2020. So that's the same date that's being used in this bill, that all dollars received on or before June 30th of 2020 are being exempted from being turned over to the ESA. They're dollars that the districts get to keep, and we're only looking at dollars going forward after June 3rd, so on July 1st, 2020 and forward, that are subject to the 16.6% cap.
Assemblywoman Anderson?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for this information. My question again is along the same lines of the cap of the 16.6%. First of all, you said that there are some districts that currently utilize it. Is there a way for us to get that list? And then my second question is for those that do have above that amount, is that then protected or earmarked for very specific items, or can it be utilized to help pay other bills that might be negotiated and or enacted in other ways.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Asher Killian, Chief Deputy Legislative Counsel, through you to the Assemblywoman. I believe part of that question may need to be answered by the Department of Education. I think they do have a list of which districts are currently in that situation and which aren't. I'm not sure if our fiscal staff has that on hand or not. For the second part of your question, generally, these dollars would be general fund dollars, so county school district general fund dollars, so they would be available for any use that the county school district wishes to use them for. It may be a question for the counties as to whether they have them earmarked for particular uses or not, but generally they would be available for whatever the district wishes to use them for.
Thank you. So just to make sure I've got it clear, it is not earmarked by the state and or protected from the state language that is being enacted at this time. District, however, can make a decision in a board of trustees meeting to earmark it, but that then is done in an open meeting, if I'm understanding that correctly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Asher Killian, Chief Deputy Legislative Counsel, through you to the Assemblywoman. Yes, so they would have to make the decision on how to spend those dollars at the local level. All this bill is doing is protecting them from being turned over to the Education Stabilization Account at a state level, but it would be a local decision as to how to spend that money.
Thank you, and thank you, Chair.
Members, any other questions? Go ahead and have a follow-up, and then I'll have a statement.
Thank you. And I appreciate my colleagues' question and request for some additional information. Can we just also, with that information, find out if any of those funds over the 16.6 have already been spent by the individual counties? Your question sparked my interest, so thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Asher Killian, Chief Deputy Legislative Counsel, through you to the Assemblyman. We can certainly try to coordinate getting that information from the department. I'm not sure if our fiscal staff has it, but we can find it and get it to you.
Thank you, members. And I had anticipated that the Department of Education would be here this morning to also present and answer questions. However, we received a call earlier this morning, just before our meeting, that they were not going to be able to make it. But they did raise some concerns with our fiscal staff regarding Section 2.3, subsection 5A, which provides for certain exclusions of money to be accounted for when calculating the amount to be transferred from a county school district ending fund balance to the Education Stabilization Account. Specifically, it excludes any funds deposited in the county school district ending fund balance that were collected on or before June 30th, 2020, which could include prior year net proceeds of minerals revenue. The Department of Education expressed a concern because the ending fund balance referenced in subsection 5A pertains to the actual ending fund balance. However, the calculation provided for in subsection 1 of section 2.3 references the budgeted ending fund balance. This creates an inconsistency in the calculation methodology. So I think it's the deposited is actual money and budgeted is in their budget, just so you have that understanding. So I think in order to fix that discrepancy in that section, I'd like to ask our legal staff if you could draft an amendment for us to standardize the language so that the actual ending fund balance is referenced in both subsection 1 and 5.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Asher Killian, Chief Deputy Legislative Counsel. We certainly can draft that amendment, and just for the sake of explanation, since the intent of these technical amendments was to protect the constitutional status of net proceeds of minerals money, it was an intentional choice to use actual rather than budgeted in that paragraph, because obviously net proceeds of minerals could come in high or low, and if we use the budgeted balance rather than the actual balance, there's a possibility that there may have been some actual net proceeds of minerals dollars that were not budgeted for that could still be swept. So the intent of this change to actual in this paragraph is to protect every single net proceeds of mineral dollar that was actually received as of that date. So it was an intentional choice, but we can certainly draft an amendment to reflect a similar methodology throughout the section.
Thank you. I would appreciate that. Any questions from the members? It's just come to my attention that we do have the list of the schools that were at the 16.6. If you'd like to come up, Mr. Douse, and share that information with the committee, that would be great. And with making the amendments, we would be closing the hole that we have, currently would have for the FY '24 with these amendments, correct? So we wouldn't have a hole in the stabilization count for FY '24 with these.
Madam Chair, Michael Nakamoto, for the record, that is correct.
Perfect. Mr. Douse, go ahead.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Adam Dross with the Fiscal Analysis Division. The Department of Education did run calculations and determine those school districts that would have a budgeted ending fund balance above 16.6% in fiscal year 2020. And based on the information provided to the Fiscal Analysis Division, it appears Esmeralda, Eureka, Story, and White Pine County school districts all had a balance greater than 16.6%. Thank you.
With that information, members, do you have any follow-up questions? Okay. Seeing none. Assemblywoman Peters, do you have a question before they leave the table? Okay.
So we've had a lot of conversations about how schools have to, and school districts have to manage money because we're on this biennium cycle, an annualized cycle. And it creates problems and frustrations with hiring practices, with additional staffing, with buying books and replacing facilities. My question is, and again, I'm not sure you can answer it, but what are these 4 or 5 counties that are holding this excess over 16.6% holding money for? What is it that they need, right? Or are they holding it because they're not staffed? Like, I'm just curious what it is that they're holding these funds for, and if it's essential for them to hold those dollars, if they can ever use those dollars for what they projected to hold it for, if this goes into effect, right, and they're capped at adding any additional funds into that amount, and if it would be better to ask them if we can make them whole for what it is they're holding that for.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Asher Killian, Chief Deputy Legislative Counsel, through you to the Assemblywoman. Unfortunately, I think most of that question would have to be directed at those districts themselves to ask why they built up those reserves and what their planned uses are. They would still be able to keep those reserves, since those would be pre-June 30th, 2020 dollars moving forward, and they would still be able to use them as they see fit. But I don't believe we have information about why they may have built those reserves or whether they have any particular uses in mind for them.
Thank you. Assemblywoman Kasama?
Thank you, Chair. I think you just answered the question. I was wondering if those excess funds had to be returned, but it sounds like they can keep them.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Asher Killian, Chief Deputy Legislative Counsel, through you to the Assemblywoman. Yes, under the provisions of this bill, it's making it explicit that those dollars received before the benchmark date are theirs and are not subject to reversion to the Education Stabilization Account.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Seeing no other questions from the members, I thank you for the presentation. I look forward to seeing the amendment. We'll have it for our work session. Thank you so much. Do we have anyone here in the audience that would like to testify in support of Senate Bill 124? Seeing none, looks like we lost everyone in Las Vegas, unless there's someone hiding behind that pillar. But I don't think so. Do we have anyone on the phone lines who would like to provide testimony in support of Senate Bill 124?
Testify in support of SB 124. Please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue.
Good morning. Chris Daly, Nevada State Education Association, the voice of Nevada educators for over 120 years. NSCA does support SB 124 to ensure that net proceeds of minerals intended for Nevada schools actually all gets to Nevada schools. On the technical amendments, we've read them many times, and while they seem a bit confusing, we believe Mr. Killian, when he describes the amendments, as technical and upholding both the Constitution and the intention of previous legislation like SB 543. We support this as amended. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any other callers?
Chair, there are no more callers in support at this time.
Thank you so much. Do we have anyone that would like to provide testimony in opposition of Senate Bill 124? See no one here in Carson City, and there's no one in Las Vegas. Do we have anyone on the phone line that would like to provide testimony in opposition of Senate Bill 124?
Chair, there are no callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you so much. So we will move to the neutral. Is there anyone here in the audience that'd like to provide? Awesome. We have one person coming to the table here in Carson City. You can start whenever you're ready.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Nikki Bailey Lundahl. I'm here representing the Nevada Mining Association. The association is proud to be your partner in education, creating quality jobs, and helping to finance critical state services. The last 3 recessions, the mining industry has taken the extraordinary step of prepaying our taxes. We do this to help bridge the gap between economic crisis and budget shortfall. If the state believes that this is the time to stop prepayment and resources are available to do that, we have no issue with stopping prepayment early.
Thank you so much for joining us. See no one else here in Carson City to provide testimony in the neutral, and I don't see anyone in Las Vegas. Do we have anyone on the phone line that would like to provide testimony in the neutral on Senate Bill 124?
Chair, there are no callers in neutral at this time.
Thank you so much. So with that, members, we will close the hearing on Senate Bill 124, and I thank the presenters for joining us here today. That moves us to the last item on our agenda, and that is public comment. If there's anyone here in Carson City that wishes to give public comment, please come up to the table. I don't see anyone on Las Vegas. If there's anyone who wishes to make public comment that are on the phones, please call us at 888-475-4499. And our participation number for today is 859-436-77-901, and then press pound. See no one here in Carson City that would like to make public comment, and I don't see anyone in Las Vegas. BPS, do we have anyone on the phone line that would like to make public comment at this time?
To provide public comment, press star 9 on your phone now to take your place in the queue. Chair, the public line is open and working, but there are no callers at this time.
All right, members, then that brings us to the end of our meeting. I wish you all a wonderful weekend, and I will see you bright and early at 8 a.m. on Monday morning. This meeting is adjourned.